Okay, we're gonna do something a little bit unusual, which is we're gonna do halacha tetzvav, which is very small halacha. Tafnan alpha halacha yudvav tetzvav.
No, I'm out already.
And then that's fine. Don't worry about it. And then we're gonna go back to finish something from halacha yudal, which was really not really related, but it's connected enough that we're gonna do it. Kisur shabarzo. If you have a cover of metal, in halacha yudal, I talked about a metal cover on a pot of liquid. Now if you have kisur shabarzo shemisimnus ala harora. A cover, a metal cover that you put on top of a baking pan when you bake something, that it bakes on top of the stove, then tzarich libun, so you have to leave into that pan. Meaning, halacha yudalad had said if you put the cover on a pot, you have to do hagol, because it's considered to be in the creation. And now it says if you have a cover on top of a pan that you bake on, then you have to leave into that cover. So the question, of course, is why do you do libun? The pan, the cover is not touching the food. The cover, it's a baking pan. It's not, so in the last halacha, when there's liquids pour, there's vapors all over the place. Hevel hakdeira is considered like it's all in the liquid. But over here, there's a loaf of bread on the bottom, or there's a cake on the bottom, and you have a cover on it. Why do you have to leave into it? So it's Magen Avraham. It's a kasha, as you can imagine. So Magen Avraham says two answers. First answer is that sometimes the pan, the cover, ends up touching the food. Let's say if the cake gets a little too high or something happens during the baking, it rises up a little bit. Whatever happens, it'll end up touching it, since that happens sometimes. So therefore, you have to leave into it, because there are times that you're baking that the cover is touching it. I forgot to say, the question is, of course, because libun, one of the rules of libun is that it has to be touching the food. If you have an oven, when you have a libun, it's only when the thing that touches it, not if it's just in the same chamber.
So if you take a hot food, let's say according to hot food is always started when you put it on something, then it's leaving?
No, if it's off the fire, then it doesn't.
Not.
Right. But here it's on the fire. Here it's baking. So the Magen Avraham says there are times that the food will. I'm a little exaggerating with it, but there are times that the food will. Let's say the challah gets a little too big and it hits the top. During the baking,
leaving it. It's just the food. Since the food is still on the fire, don't touch the food. It needs leaving. Like I took a fork, stuck into something that's on the fire. Don't touch the food. The food fork needs leaving.
As opposed to what? Touching the food. As opposed to what else could it touch if not for the food?
As opposed to, like in the case of normally, you have a grill in between the fire and the food.
Oh, right, that's correct. Even if the fire is not in between them, but it's on the other side, that's also, yes, that's correct. Mm-hmm. Okay, so he says, so the Magen Avraham says, when it's sometimes. So to that, I'm going to pause for a second. The Sharatzin says, it only happens sometimes. It only happens sometimes. We're not even sure if it happened at all. He says, and there are shittas that hold Chametz is hetera bala, you don't have to do libun anytime. So he says, I would logically say that you should be able to get away with libun kal. Since it's only all this is a chumrah, maybe it happened and hetera bala, maybe libun kal. He says the only problem is that the Pri Megadim says you do have to libun gamar. That this Magen Avraham is libun gamar, and which is why the Mishnah Berurah says you should do libun gamar. So the Mishnah Berurah is saying, even though you would think there's a lot of reasons here to say that you shouldn't have to do libun, because maybe it touched, and even if it touched, it would only be a chumrah anyhow. He says, no, you have to leave him gone. That's just...
And the
Sharatzin says all of that. He doesn't say the right Tashmish about it. He says, it's Ein Ben Yomer, and it maybe didn't touch it, and it's had terrible. He says, I would logically say that you should do leave him kal. He says, but Pri Megadim says, specifically on this Magen Avraham, you have to leave him gone. Okay? So that's why the Mishnah Berurah says just to leave him gone. Now, the Magen Avraham has a second answer. Okay, the second answer is that when you have the bread baking in the pan, the vapors that come out of that bread, the reicha that comes out of that bread is enough to make the cover need libun also. Even though the first answer was that it touches it, the second answer was it doesn't touch it, but the vapors that come out is enough to make it considered to need libun also. Okay, so what he's saying is that just like vapors from a liquid make you need to do hagala, so too vapors from a solid make you need to do libun, which is a tremendous chiddush. It's fakir from many achronim, including the Ramah himself in Toras Chatzos says not like that. And it goes way down, all over the place. And this answer of the Magen Avraham, I should say the Mishnah Berurah brings the first answer of the Magen Avraham. He does not bring this answer of the Magen Avraham because it's not halacha. It's not accepted to do like that. And we've talked about this before. We'll this at the Shulchan later on. In Taf Samachal that says not like that Magen Avraham. But that's not accepted. I'm saying the Mishnah Berurah doesn't bring that answer. He only brings the first answer, which is unless it touches, that's why you have to leave. Okay? That's for halacha tetzvav. So I think we're going to now go backwards. In halacha yudalad, we can call it tetzvav if you'd like. We talked about that there's three levels of vapors that come out of a liquid. the halacha yudal is that hevlach kedera. It's such a compacted amount of the vapors are so compacted and they're so in such a small area. It's considered like it's a kli rishon itself. There's regular zayah that comes out of a pot that hits something above it. Which is considered zayah. It's considered like iru kli rishon. And then there's reicha, which is even lower level, that it's just a vapor like coming out of a dry food. That usually we say you don't have to you shouldn't bake two foods together, but the evidence will be okay, and zeh is okay, all kinds of things that are okay. So there's a shayla that came up. That's why I'm talking about it now, because it came up now. But it relates to this thing and very much connects to you'll see the rivash that has to do with this dinner of zeh, which is like this. The shayla was whether if you have carbon dioxide that you use to put into a seltzer or into soda or something like that, whether for Pesach, whether there should be a problem for whether that stuff whether it has to be kosher. There's such a thing to make it not kosher Pesach.
We have a
What?
We have one place that's carbon dioxide.
We have one place that makes carbon dioxide. I'm not talking about the people who make carbon dioxide. I'm talking about the people who use it. I'm talking about
it's kidneys.
From kidneys.
That's the carbon stuff that put into the soda, you mean?
I'm talking about the stuff you put into soda.
Remember what Rabbi Jerv said about that?
Right.
Okay.
He said if it should be out because just no end of marriage is if you would eat Chametz Pesach and you grab the seder.
Wonderful. Okay, so that's a very non-halachic way of looking at things. Okay, so let's see what the shayla is. Okay, let's see what the shayla is. Okay, there's three ways. I'm going to make three groups of ways that you could make carbon dioxide. Okay, one is when you make a fermentation, when sugar turns into alcohol, a byproduct of that fermentation is carbon dioxide. Okay, the sugar turns into alcohol and carbon dioxide. So, like when you make bread or beer or schnapps or ethanol, any of these kinds of things, when you're creating alcohol, a byproduct of turning sugar into alcohol is carbon dioxide.
Yeah, that's fermentation.
Of a fermentation. So when you ferment,
bacteria makes the sugar into alcohol.
The yeast helps the sugar become alcohol. But it breaks it down. If you want, you can see the chemical formula. It breaks the sugar into two things: alcohol and carbon dioxide. It's a byproduct of the.
That's a vapor.
It's a vapor. Yes,
that's the capture.
It's a vapor. Yes, we'll get to how they capture in a second. Yes, that's one thing. That's one. The second thing is when you burn things. Okay, when you combust things, it creates carbon dioxide. So people die. That's I don't know if that's why people die, but that's carbon monoxide. Okay, but it's more carbon dioxide is much more famous for anybody who reads papers because of it's supposedly causes global warming, because that carbon dioxide when you burn coal to make energy, that coal or the back of your car comes out and there's carbon dioxide coming out, and according to those who agree with this, it's creating a layer up in the atmosphere which is holding the heat in and blah blah blah, etc. Because that's not for us. Okay, so that's a way that's another thing that creates carbon dioxide. And then there's the traditional just in a lab that you can create it, or when you make other reactions, it's a byproduct. In the labs they can create it. You mix this and this and this together, and it creates carbon dioxide like anything else. Okay, so the last two are of course not negatas. They wouldn't be chumsic. Okay? The last two wouldn't be anything. And our focus is going to be on the first one, which is if a guy's making bread, if you go past a bakery and it smells really good, it smells good because when they bake the bread, the carbon dioxide gets out and it has a smell to it. The yeast and the carbon dioxide are escaping and it has a certain smell to it. Okay, so when people catch that stuff, so
you can smell the carbon dioxide.
Part of what you smell when you walk past a big commercial bakery, why it smells so good is because you're smelling it again. So
it's not just the chocolate,
right?
Carbon dioxide has an odor.
I didn't say that. Part of the
carrier. It's a carrier.
I can't say for sure. Part of the when you bake bread. Okay.
You breathe out carbon dioxide. Plants give out carbon dioxide.
Yes. So no, it's not. I'm sorry.
No, we give out carbon dioxide.
The alcohol and carbon dioxide.
I feel his breath smells, but not carbon dioxide.
Okay. I'll take it back. Okay. Well, put that on the side because we're not again.
Because my Maria on Pesach, I'm smelling a Pesach something. It's comments of it.
Okay. Put on the side.
Okay.
When the plants when they capture carbon dioxide and they use it to make soda, it comes as a gas, and they convert it into a liquid or into a solid. Okay, the solid is what we call dry ice. Okay, dry ice is solidified carbon dioxide, or as a liquid. Okay, now the first sources that there are about this are all like in the 1900 or right before the 1900s or just after 1900, when this industry was first starting. Okay, you see, because I dealt with some people who work in this industry, and they tell me that when they would explain to me how these things went, then you see that as the industry was starting, that's when there were two starting. That's when carbonated beverages first started. Right. Well, I should say, I'm sure that there were things like beer were around from beforehand, but the idea to take the carbon dioxide and stick it into Pepsi, that was starting around that. So in those chuvas that talk about it, the first chuvas that talk about it, or the one that I saw anyhow, all say that it's awesome. You're not using it on Pesach. I don't. The names are not. The names are in my papers upstairs. Okay, it's a bunch of. None of the people there.
How do they call carbon dioxide? What was it?
They use a German word for it. I don't know the word. It's upstairs. Okay, I'm sorry. That footnote is not in there. It's upstairs. So they all assume that it's usher. If it comes from beer, it's usher. They don't even explain why. Right? It was like so obvious that it's usher. For Pesach. Right. They assume that it's usher. They don't feel like they even have to explain why they think it should be usher. On the other hand, they asked Rosh Zalman. This question came up about 30 years ago. There was some kind of a problem in Eretz Yisrael for Pesach. Some kind of a problem, a different problem. And they said, by the way, what about the carbon dioxide Shabbat? There's a different problem of it. And Rosh Zalman said, no, ridiculous. There's nothing wrong with it. Don't worry about it. It doesn't make a difference. Completely not. Don't think about it. So we're going to see if we go through the question. The way I wrote over here was it's
not explaining a reason.
Right. Elu Divil Kim Chaim. They're both right. Okay. Those person were right and Rosh Zalman was right. Everybody's right. Okay. So now like this. So in order to get this, let's go back to something which is ruined again to Aruch Yidal, which is like this. The tshuva in the Rivash about Zeh. Okay? It's a very an important tshuva we talked about last time. Alcohol boils at about 173 degrees, and water boils at about 212 degrees. Okay, so someone came up with an idea that you can distill alcohol out of water. You ferment something. Let's say you make wine. In the Rivash case, you make wine. And it's 13% alcohol. If you heat up that liquid to more than 173, but less than 212, what's going to happen is the alcohol is going to boil out, and the water is going to stay behind. And then, if you catch those vapors and you cool them down, you're going to end up with something that has more alcohol than 13%. Instead of 13%, it'll be 40% or 60%. However, as much as you strengthen it, and you'll end up with a mixture that's higher alcohol content, what we call brandy. Okay, that's what. And the Chametz is that stuff usher? You made brandy out of stam yayin. Is it usher or is it not usher? What's the shaila? So he says, should you say, here's the pot of brandy, and then there's in order for the brandy to go from here to being this, from the wine to become brandy, it goes through, it's invisible, it disappears. It's as if this is like coming from no place. You don't see a connection. This does not connect to this. There's no liquid connection. It's just, there's a pot cooking over here, and over here there's another pot in which is all of a sudden it's magically filling up with a liquid that it's not the same thing. It's not even taste the same. It has a different taste to it. So should we say that it has no connection to that thing? There's this invisible vapor that we know is going on.
The same taste.
It has a similar taste, right? But the truth is that in the Shiloh, we'll see in a second, he says it has no taste. Okay, I don't think he means it so seriously, but so he says it goes from here to here, and there's no connection. Or do you say, come on, everyone can see that this thing is becoming this. It's put into a system, so it should become us. That was the Shiloh Rivash, and the Rivash, which is written. If I got my dates correctly,
is this a question?
Yes.
What's the challenge question? I mean, normally, we know Zeya, like the water. What is it, right? The Zeya goes up and it condenses. Nobody would say that if you see Zeya coming from a pot and then droplets form, but it came from nowhere. So why is that different? Is that you don't see Zeya?
The answer is, the only reason you know that Zeya that condenses us is because of this Tshuva in the Rivash. The din in Shulchan Aruch comes from this. The din in Shulchan Aruch is from this din in Rivash, and a Rosh who has the same Shaila, who the Rosh is the Tshuva in the regular part of your day, in the Bas B'chol part, and the Rivash is in Hilchos Stam Yayin. That's where it comes from. That's where it comes from. That you know it is from a Tshuva in the Rosh and the Rivash. We're doing the Rivash's Tshuva today, but the Rosh and the Rivash is the same kind of a Tshuva. That's where it comes from. Okay, so the Rivash says, that's why I'm telling you why it's such an important Tshuva. That's where the din comes from. Okay, so the Rivash said. That yes, it's awesome. He says yes, it's awesome, and he brings one of his main lines is from Mishnayos in Kashering. Okay, and the Mishnayos they say that if you have a bathhouse, and there's condensation on the walls, or if you have a bathhouse with condensation on the walls, that liquid that's there has the din of the water in the bathhouse, because whether it could be machshir for tumah, whether it is tamei, a bunch of different cases like that. And so he says, so you see that the vapors that are there, that are collecting, they're not coming from they're not squirting it from the bathhouse up to there. Just the bathhouse is hot, and the walls and the windows are all full of liquid. That liquid is considered to have the din of what's inside of it. So you see that there's a connection from the bath to the water that's over there, even though there's like this empty in between it. Okay, that's what he says. But the Mishnah said, if you have a cave, and in the cave there's condensation on the walls, that comes from coldness. That's not considered to have a connection to anything. It's just like as if it's brand new water. That water does not have. We don't say that water is from someplace else. It's like brand new. So if you would just look at the truth just like that, you would say the Rivash is maybe being machal between hot and cold. A cold condensation on the wall maybe doesn't count, and hot does count. If that would be true, if that's what it would depend on hot and cold, then in our case it would be mutter. Because in our case, the vapors that come off, the carbon dioxide that comes off at ambient temperature. The fermentation happens at an ambient temperature, and those vapors that come off are coming off at an ambient temperature. So you would say, it's coming off cold. So if you read the Rivash just plain, just say who, it's just doing between cold and hot, you would say, in our case it's cold, in cases of cold it doesn't count. And in cases of only by hot doesn't count, like by distillation, then it counts, but by cold it doesn't count. That's what if you just read it straight. But the truth is, when you look better at the Rivash, what he says, what it seems to me, he's saying is like this. When you have distillation, then there's a constant and steady flow of liquid from here to here. As this pot is getting lower, this pot is getting higher. It's a clear connection between them. There's a clear and steady connection from this pot to this pot. So you say, the fact that there's this in-between, invisible in-between, but it's obvious that this is going into this, and therefore it's usher. Okay? That's what it looks to me like in the Rivash. In which case, in our case, the same thing happens. It's a cold thing, but the more you make beer, the more you get a collection of vapors on the other side called liquid carbon dioxide. So you do see a connection, and it would be us. That's how it would seem. Now, this thing in this Rivash also has another din in Shulchan Aruch that talks about it in a different context, which is like this. The din is, this is a Gemara in Avodah Zarah. If you have a barrel of wine, and on top of the barrel you put a loaf of bread. So the Gemara has a bunch of different cases. It depends if the bread is hot or cold. It depends if the bread is wheat bread or barley bread. If the barrel is open or closed. A whole bunch of different cases. And in some cases, the bread becomes usher, and in some cases, the bread becomes mutter. Okay, the details is not important to us. But the Gemara has a bunch of cases, and in some cases, the bread is mutter, in some cases, the bread is usher. Now, in that case, the barrel of wine is cold. It's cold. Just the barrel is just ambient temperature. So how does the time get from the barrel of wine into the bread that's sitting on the top? Okay? If you think the Rivash means just hot and cold, here it's cold. How do the vapors get in there? And the answer is, because it doesn't have to be hot. The point is, if you see a strong connection between the barrel and the bread, meaning because the bread has a time of the wine in it, then the bread becomes out. It's what? But I'm saying, even though we would usually say Reicha is Lav Nosahi, in cases where there's a strong Reicha, we had said last time, Reicha is Lav Nosahi is only because Reicha is usually such a small amount that the amount is bustling to the other food. But if the Reicha is strong enough, that's what, if you get the right case, if the bread is the right kind and the barrel, all those plus and right, it's going to be nice and time into the bread, and the bread's going to become usher. So there it's happening in cold. Everything's cold over there. The reason it's happening is because if there's enough of a connection, then you do say it's asers. It doesn't be dafka hot to aser. If there's enough of a connection, the time from here is going into the time over there, then it's going to aser the food. Okay, so now I have a question. There's two ways to understand what the Rivash is saying now. At the beginning of the tshuva, the Rivash says, in the Shaila, and in the beginning also he says, he describes the brandy as being holach, kaimoi, reichoi, umamoshay. Okay? That this new stuff has nothing to do with the original one. It has no flavor connection to it. Holach, kaimoi, reichoi, umamoshay. Okay, the two things have nothing to do. That's how he describes it in the question and in the beginning, as if they have no connection to each other. In which case, you would say that what makes it, so why is it also? Why does he pass on it? It's also because there's such a constant, steady flow from one to the other that this one becomes, it's obvious that this is coming from here and it becomes usher. It's not because it has any time to it. Why in the case of the bread on top of the barrel is it usher? Also for the same thing. It's just, the fact that it's time, the time is not what's important, but the time tells us that there's a lot of vapor transferring from one to the other. but that's one way to see the Rivash. The other way is that at the end of the tshuva, or towards the end of the tshuva, the Rivash says, his words are V'gam tam hayayin v'reichoy nisha by k'tzas, that the brandy that you create has a certain amount of taste of the original wine, which anybody who drinks brandy would tell you that also, that has a certain amount of taste from the wine. It's not nothing, it has a taste from the wine. In which case, it needs to have a tam in order. The only reason why the stuff on the other end, the brandy is usher, is because, not just because it's a continuous stream, but because the brandy that's on the other side has a taste of the original stuff.
In brandy, you have some of the original wine in there also?
Yes. See, the way it works is
just to get the alcohol out of that.
No, see, when you make a distillation, even though it sounded like it's going to be perfect, it's not perfect at all. When you boil, let's say, raise up the wine to 180 degrees. Well, it doesn't happen that all the alcohol boils out and all the water stays still. If that would happen, schnapps would be 100% alcohol. It's not. It's only 40% alcohol. The reason is because together with the alcohol that's boiling out, also boils out some water. It evaporates, some water boils over, and some flavor carries over. Lots of things carry over.
They don't just take wine and put in some wine, you know.
Again?
The only wine part that's present in the brandy is because it came over with the distillation process. It's not that they have wine, I don't know, they put in wine. You know?
No. It's what carries over. No, all that goes into is what carries over. But what boils out is, the alcohol boils out because you're over 173. Well, much of the alcohol. Some of the water is already evaporating. It's also starting to transfer. And the tam, usually the flavor components, boil at the lowest temperature. They're also passing over. So there's lots of things passing over to the other side, and then you usually have to distill something more than once to get it to the 40, 50, 60% you want. The first time you get it, you'll get it to 20, 30%. Then you do it again to 40, 50, you get it to the amount that you like it to. And then you boil it, the distillation happens more than once, even to get it there. It's not as perfect as you would imagine. They say, I put it to 180 degrees, all the alcohol goes, all the water stays done. It doesn't work like that. It's not as exact as that. Okay, so the brandy does have time of the original thing, and that's part of its feature, that it has a certain amount of that wine taste to it, but it's more alcoholic, so it has whatever you're looking for. So, which would sound like that it is important to have tam in the other food, which would be the way we would usually think. Usually, in order to say this is the issue from here transferred to over here, you would think that you have to have tam transferred over, and it would go well with the Gemara that says by the bread that the bread is only also if it has the tam of the wine in it. Okay. So now I'm going to pause this for a second now and go back to the carbon dioxide. The people in the industry said something like this. About 100 years ago, they figured out how to collect these vapors and to condense them into a liquid or into a solid. Okay? That's what they figured out about 100 years ago. They said to me, the ways of purifying that stuff weren't invented to the 1950s, 1960s. And they were convinced that in 1900, when somebody would make carbon dioxide, there would be plenty of carryover of taste. If you think about it, the guy's making schnapps, and the vapors are pouring out of his building, okay? And someone's capturing those vapors and condensing the vapors into liquid carbon dioxide. And they assumed that there would be a fair amount of carryover of taste also in those vapors. So when you came to people 100 years ago and said to them, should this carbon dioxide have the din of chametz? It came from a beer. In their cases, it came from beer. Should we treat it like chametz or should we not treat it like chametz? So they said, you're making a pot of beer. Vapors are going out and collecting in a pot someplace else as a liquid carbon dioxide, and that liquid carbon dioxide, you can't taste it. It would freeze your mouth. But that stuff is known to have a certain carryover of taste from it, so of course it's usher. You don't have to explain to you why it's usher. It's like all the cases we just talked about. It's like making brandy out of schnapps. It's like making.
It's not boiling. It's not a process of boiling.
So I don't think that according to the Rivash, the crucial.
No, I don't mean that. I mean the taste would carry over even though it wasn't to boil. It's something else.
It's just just like the case of the bread sitting on top of a barrel. Tam can transfer even though there was no heat. Because if the situation is set up just so.
It's not vapors emitting. It's a fermentation process with the bacteria. You know, it's a whole
vapors are coming out. Vapors are rising out of the thing, and they're carrying with them not just the carbon dioxide, other things are traveling also. Just like when you have a barrel of wine, there's not even any fermentation going on. So what's rising up? They're just coming out. And if the Gemara says, if you make it just so, the barrel sealed and the bread is this kind of bread, whatever it is, if you set it up just so, enough will carry over to be nice and time into the bread. The machlokes is what you have to do, but something you have to do. So over here also, there's going to be a carryover. Mm-hmm. Okay, that was then. So by then, it was partial the thing should be usher. Okay, it was like, why shouldn't this stuff be usher? But then came the 1950s and 1960s. Now they told me there are 4 ways that they purify the carbon dioxide to get rid of all that carryover. Okay, 3 of the methods that they use are while it's still a vapor, before it turns into a liquid, and the 4th is after it's liquefied. That's the 4th one is done then. So think about it like this now. Now you have, by the time it's a liquid, it's already been purified 3 times, and after it's a liquid, it gets purified again. Mm-hmm. So that means in our days, when you walk into a place that makes carbon dioxide, if you were to taste that stuff, it has no taste. It has no anything from the original thing is gone. So why the person said 100 years ago to us, that's easier to understand. But nowadays, so now it's going to depend how you understood what the important part of the rivash was. If you think that the rivash just meant there has to just be a steady connection from the isser to the new pot of stuff that's collecting over here, as long as you see just a steady connection, you see going from here, and all of a sudden, and this pot is filling up, then you'll say, even though there's no Nesina Tam, you'll say, if you understood the rivash like that, as long as there's a steady connection, without any, even without Nesina Tam, then you would answer it. So then in our case also, that's what's going on. We have a steady connection. The guys are, making beer, and over there, there's a bottle of liquid carbon dioxide that's filling up over here. So you would say then it would be also. But if you say, which it seems, which Ramzan would be saying, which is that in order to make it also, not only does it have to be a steady connection, but it's got to have a time to it also. Like the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah about the bread, it's got to have a time to it. Or like the Rivash himself says, that the brandy has a time of the original thing that it came from, which is where we usually work with Isser, is that for the Isser to transfer from here to here, it has to be Nesina's time. Then you say, just because there's a steady connection, but there's no time to this thing, this carbon dioxide doesn't taste anything like the thing that it came from originally. So in that case, then you would say that it's not usher. The fact that there's just a connection, there's an observable connection that this is making, and all of a sudden this pot is filling up more and more. Would not be enough to usher something like that. Okay, that's how I would see what they're saying. Why they ushered 100 years ago? That's easy for me to understand. Why would be nowadays? What the deal will be nowadays would depend on how you understand what's the crucial part of what the Rivash is trying to say. Okay, that's all I understand. So now I'm going to stop for a second, or stop completely, and go to just a side point, which is I ask some other people what they do, okay, and I'll give you a drop of the Matthias in a second. And the people I asked, the OU and the Ada and the Hisachas Rabbanim all say that they don't allow people to use carbon dioxide to Pesach if it came from Chametz or from Kiddush. They all said they wouldn't Chametz or Kiddush they wouldn't use, with varying degrees of how seriously they take that. Okay. The OU asked the company for a letter saying, give us a letter that didn't come from Chametz Kiddush. And the Hisachas.
Where did I get it from?
I told you can get it from
sugar,
combustion.
Oh, come on.
You can get. We'll get to that in a second. All this practical side. You can get it from lots of other. There are other fermentations that you can get it from that would not be. You can get it from artificial.
Get it from wine.
What?
To get it from wine too.
Well, it have to be kosher wine then.
Okay, so year round you need that.
Okay. Hold it. You thought for a second. Just hold that for 1 second. And the Ada. And the Zaka said they have research into their suppliers and they know where they get it from. They didn't explain to me how they do that. Is it a letter? They said, I don't know. And the Ada, from what I heard from the Ada, is that they're very not put on it. Again, I don't know how much they probe, but from the way they described to me how much they do about it, it sounded like they took it very seriously. Okay, on the opposite extreme. Now, none of those 3 people that I spoke to were able to tell me, or that I indirectly spoke to, were able to tell me whether their Rav Machshir, their Bezdin, their Paisik had made a formal decision that you need that. None of them were able to say that. They all said they do it, but they couldn't tell me whether it was a formal, official psak that you needed. Is it a chumrah? Did the people who run hashgacha on their own just decide to do it? It wasn't clear to me whether how they came to that decision of what they do. That wasn't clear to me from any of those places.
Did anybody say chametz no, kidneys yes?
Rega. The opposite extreme. The opposite extreme.
Did you look into this?
I've been working on this for a while. It was negated to one of our companies. So I'll tell you about that anyway. Okay. On the opposite extreme, Rabbi Heinemann said that there was a time that he was makbid on it, but he he reconsidered, and he can't see anything wrong with this thing at all, and he doesn't care if it's chametz, kidneys, he doesn't care anything. I said, do you mind if we say that over here? He said, no problem, everything's fine. You can't be anything wrong with this stuff. It's just a recha, and just a ear, and the ear can't be us. Okay. And then the middle is the CRC, who for the past couple of years has had the following policy, which was we would not let a company send us from chametz, but from kidneys we would take it. We would take it from kidneys. And within that, all we did was we asked the companies for a letter. We also did this letter kind of a thing. And the way I understand it, I did not finish speaking to Rabbi Schwartz about it, but a little bit of my speaking to him so far is that it might be mutter and din altogether. Chum of the Pesach, people don't want to have carbon. They don't want to sit at the Seder and drink seltzer made out of chametz. So therefore, we have to do something like that. I can't say that's 100% what he said, but that's we were holding it this time. Okay, now.
So you think we should be certifying our carbon dioxide company for Pesach then?
Well, I don't think it's certified for Pesach. They make it from alcohol, ethanol, from corn. So we would whether we certify or not, maybe that's another step. Now, it happens to be like this. The guys in the industry said to me like this.
Oh, yeah,
there are many more people making carbon dioxide. Many more people making carbon dioxide than needed. Okay, in other words, every bakery and beer manufacturer and shops, there are lots of people who are creating carbon dioxide more than theoretically would be needed to fill up all the soda bottles and stuff like that. So what goes on is that the way the industry works is that it's the people who want it who collect it. It's not that the guy who makes alcohol, who makes schnapps, who says, I'm going to collect my carbon dioxide and sell it to somebody. It's not worth it for him. Somebody who wants to buy carbon dioxide, or like our company who wants to sell carbon dioxide, goes and says, "Could you do me a favor? Can I collect your vapors and turn them into carbon dioxide?" They're the people who go after them. That's negated to us as follows. It means is that the fact that in the past few years a zillion ethanol plants have opened up doesn't mean that there's now lots of ethanol carbon dioxide coming to people. The people who are buying the carbon dioxide may be set up with the people who they buy it from. It's not like whoever makes carbon dioxide is whoever has a plant that produces vapors of carbon dioxide is collecting it and trying to sell it. It's not like people who make milk, who make cheese, that they will have weight, they're trying to sell their weight.
I would imagine that the companies, whoever allows them to do it, charges them for it.
I'm not sure where they charge them at.
I mean, maybe once there's a bigger market, this guy also want to make an extra buck.
But I'm saying to you is that the way they said it is it's not set up at this time. It's not that when I build an ethanol plant, I make a carbon dioxide collection that's a part of building the plant and then try to sell it to somebody.
Of course, I understand that.
If somebody will come to me and says, can I buy your carbon dioxide? Can I set up this collection?
Every company tries to make another buck.
Yes, I'm sure they charge them for it. But
I think they're not experts at it. I think our company just attached themselves to a corn facility,
right?
And probably went over to them and said, we're going to build this, and they made a contract where you don't have to pay a lot for it. Probably.
I understand, but my point is that the fact that 10 new ethanol plants open up today doesn't mean that all of a sudden the business is going to lean more in their direction. The people who have been buying it will keep on buying it from where they will. It will eventually spread to them, but it's not automatic that now there's more of it around to buy from. Okay. Now, one more thing is that what's changed since the olden days is that the early Jews all talk about buying it from beer. That's what people who talk about this. I say they get it from beer. And my understanding from the beer companies is that beer companies all collect their carbon dioxide and none of them sell to anybody else. Because what they do is they collect it themselves and re-inject it into their product. Okay, so the beer companies, I don't know what they used to do 100 years ago, but their business now is they're collecting the carbon dioxide. They're all doing that, but not to sell to somebody else. They want to re-inject it into their product. Sometimes it's good for the processing to take it out in the beginning and later to re-inject it. It's naturally forming. It's like champagne. When you make champagne, the bubbles naturally are there. So instead of letting it stay there, they're taking it out and then re-injecting it. They don't sell to anybody else. So the shiloh for us more is not the beer companies, it's more the schnapps companies. That's more the shiloh now.
It
could be. It could be they're buying extra also. That could be. But in other words, beer, which is of all these things, for us the most serious carbon shiloh we have is the beer. I don't think that anybody buys it from bread companies. I can't say that for sure. But beer companies are not selling their carbon dioxide to other people. That's not what's going on here. What was going on 100 years ago?
I think they're going to do in a place with large quantities. They're going to build some, equipment to process carbon dioxide. Places large quantities of carbon dioxide.
Okay.
Which probably wouldn't be baking bread or it'd be like a whole corn processing facility to make ethanol.
People who bake bread produce lots of carbon dioxide. I don't think it's collected. We'll talk about that. Okay. But I don't think that it's because it's going through the same reaction. The same
don't want bread to be baked. There's corn. You're processing tons of corn.
Natural ovens. How much bread did they make? They said all day baking bread.
It doesn't come near the tonnage of
Okay. So I'm saying is that the hummus potentially comes from schnapps. Schnapps, Baruch Hashem, in America is more corny than it is hummusy. We're more likely to have that. I mean, that more kidneys. But anyhow, okay, that's what it is.